Okay, we'll start with this. Well, apparently, Jesse Vargas versus Liam Smith in play for the Joshua Ruiz undercard. And, my initial reaction to this fight is that this is exactly the kind of fight that Jesse Vargas needs if he really does aspire to become a 3-division champion. Jesse Vargas, he did hold the WBA regular title in the 140-pound division, and he held the WBO title in the 147-pound division, and he's still on a title run right here at 154 pounds, a division with a lot of live animals. Jeff Horn found that out. He found that out the hard way.
Last week.
Against Michael Zarafa last week. I know you guys had to have seen that knockout by now, and this is what I'm talking about. That for these guys that, they're a little bit too big for welterweight. They can't quite make it as comfortably as they used to, so they decide to go up there to junior middleweight. Well, it's a whole different ball game up there. You got to understand that. Just because you outgrew that weight class doesn't mean you're adequately suited for this weight class. So if Jesse Vargas, if he's got aspirations of becoming a world champion, a fight with the likes of Liam Smith is just what the doctor ordered. And here's why. We know that very recently, Jesse Vargas was in deep negotiations to square off against the WBO champion Jaime Munguia, but those negotiations, they fizzled out. And I don't want to get too into that because it's a sordid affair, might take a lot of time to explain. So for those interested in what happened there, I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. But needless to say, things didn't work out. And in spite of all of that, I still feel that Jesse Vargas would have been biting off more than he could chew in that fight, squaring off against a big, physical opponent at a weight where Jesse really hasn't been tested, you understand. So this fight with Liam Smith, this is the adequate prelude to those kinds of fights. You understand that Liam Smith is a good litmus test for a welterweight that has moved up into junior middleweight. He's a good litmus test because Liam Smith, for what it's worth, he's not a bad fighter. And he's only ever lost 2 fights, and those 2 losses, they weren't the Joe Blows. One was to Canelo Alvarez, who's a top 5 pound-for-pound fighter, and the other was to Jaime Munguia, who we just talked about, the WBO's 154-pound champion. All things considered, there's not a lot to be ashamed of in there. I mean, really, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So, you're talking about a solid, a full-fledged junior middleweight who can service as a litmus test for a guy like Jesse Vargas, who in many ways is still a newbie to the weight and has yet to really make a statement, really accomplish something. I like the fight. I think the fight has a competitive element because, one, Jesse Vargas is still making his bones as a junior middleweight, you understand. He's still garnering experience at this weight. And 2, Liam Smith,
he's on a winning streak.
He's on a bit of a hot streak. He won his last 2 fights by way of technical knockout. A win over Sam Eggington, a TKO stoppage, and another TKO stoppage over, I think it was Mario Lozano, guy like that, whatever. Point is,
this could be competitive.
Given the ingredients that go into this fight, it has the potential to be competitive because Jesse Vargas is arguably a more polished boxer than Liam Smith. But it being that Liam Smith is a physical, rough and tumble kind of fighter who just so happens to be a full-fledged junior middleweight, he can pose enough resistance to Jesse Vargas that he can make things difficult for him. In that way, the fight has a competitive element and it could prove to be more entertaining than it seems at first glance. So I do like the fight. I think that's good decoration for the Joshua versus Ruiz rematch undercard. Yeah, that's a decent fight. I don't know about, chief support. I don't know if it's that good, but it's good enough that I wouldn't mind seeing that on the undercard. I think it's a good enough fight. So, let's see what happens with that. But I will say that, this is the adequate prelude to Jesse Vargas' title run at 154 pounds. Because I'm telling you, if he goes biting off more than he could chew, too fast, too soon, he could end up how Jeff Horn ended up last week. Okay, this 154, this ain't welterweight, okay? It's a whole different ball game up here. And just speaking of things going on in the junior middleweight division, it just so happens that Lara's fight with Canelo Alvarez's older brother, a guy that seemed wildly unprepared for that fight, he didn't make weight. You see how he performed. You see how it all turned out, Lara got him out of there in, 2 rounds? This fight with this walking heavy bag managed to get 1,400,092 viewers during the main event. It peaked at 1.4 million. That's really saying something. That further denotes what I've been talking about here on the channel. That the PBC's relationship with Showtime at this point in the juncture, it may have become obsolete because just about any of their fighters, so long as they're fighting on Fox, they will get substantially more viewership and thereby get substantially more exposure for fighting on Fox instead of fighting on Showtime. For a contrast, for a retrospect, remember, Landy Lara and Jarrett Hurd's fight last year, a great fight with a fantastic aesthetic, you know, it was a great fight from start to finish. That fight brought in the lowest numbers for a main event that year on that network. And that was a far better, far more competitive, far more significant fight than what we just saw this past weekend with Lara and Canelo's brother. Yet, this fight between Lara and Canelo's brother got, 2-3 times the viewership that fight got. So just imagine, hypothetically speaking, if you had a fight like Lara versus Hurd on Fox instead of Showtime, what kind of viewership that would have got. You see what I'm talking about? And this is what I mean by the PBC's relationship with Showtime may have become obsolete, and it might be time to put all their chips into their relationship with Fox, as opposed to whatever they got going on with Showtime. Because, you know, the idea is to get your fighters exposure so that they can turn into moneymakers. And Showtime's ability to do that, it's waning.
Not up to scratch.
Now, just regards in regards to that fight and what effect it has on the weight class. Look, beating Canelo's older brother, given the condition of that guy and how he performed, it's not making a statement. You know, Lara's not making a statement by beating that guy from pillar to post. He's not. But the fight itself does have repercussions because, as I mentioned in a previous video, there was a version of the WBA title on the line, a vacant version of the title. And because Lara is now in possession of the version of that title, that lines him up for a Julian Williams fight. And that is a fascinating fight. That could be yet another titillating fight that we see in the junior middleweight division. Here's why.
Styles make
We know that Lara's a pure boxer. We know that that's his implementation. That's how he goes about things. We also know that Julian Williams is a boxer puncher. I talk about it here on the channel all the time, that pure boxers, in terms of styles, in the realm of styles making fights, pure boxers have a stylistic advantage over boxer punchers more often than not. But what's intriguing about the situation is that, you know, Lara's 36 years old. He's not the guy that boxed the socks off of Austin Trout. He's not that guy anymore. He's 36 years old. So even though he has a stylistic advantage, you wonder if he's still competing at the same level, or at least at a sufficient level to where he could beat Julian Williams. Because even if Lara has a stylistic advantage, the level at which he operates has its role to play. That, you know what, yeah, you got the right style for the job, but you're just not on the level. And if you're not on the level, this guy might beat you. You look at Julian Williams as a boxer puncher. He's not an outside guy.
Nope.
He's a mid-range to inside guy. Mid-range to inside is important when jotting down
what he can do,
taking stock of his characteristics as a fighter, because him being a mid-range to inside guy means he can apply pressure. You know, he's not a pressure fighter. He's not that through and through. He's not always a front foot guy, but it's something that he can do. He's a mid-range to inside guy. Lest we forget, he was all in the phone booth, all in the crawl space with Jarrett Hurd. That's supposed to be Jarrett Hurd's sweet spot. Yet in that sweet spot, Julian Williams got the best of him. What that communicates is that Julian Williams, while he's not a pressure fighter, he does know how to apply it. And it just so happens that if pure boxers have any kind of kryptonite, it's when a guy applies pressure, when he swarms them, when he crowds them, when he smothers their work, when he draws them out into a war, when he forces them to trade.
They don't like it.
Julian Williams being a mid-range to inside guy, it's important to take note of that. You see, the stylistic advantage that a pure boxer has over a boxer puncher really hinges on what the boxer puncher decides to do. How does he decide to approach the fight? Does he decide to box with the pure boxer, or does he decide to punch with the pure boxer? It all depends. Now, if he so decides to box with that pure boxer, then he's playing right into that guy's hands. He's playing into that guy's strengths. Fighting in a finesse fight, a chess match kind of fight. That's the kind of fight that the pure boxer wants. Whereas if the boxer puncher so decides to up the tempo a bit, up the volume a bit, pressure the guy, stay in front of the guy, crowd him, make him uncomfortable, force him into situations, force him to trade, keep that guy on the move, keep him busy.
pure boxer don't like that.
Staying with the guy, cutting the ring off, pinning him down and forcing him to trade. And if he doesn't want to trade, if he decides to dive into a clinch, you rough him up in the clinch. Essentially, it's the difference between fighting a tactical fight, a strategic fight, and fighting a physical fight. That if that boxer puncher finds himself confronted with a pure boxer, it behooves him to make it a rough and tumble kind of fight, a physical fight, because if he makes it a strategic fight,
Pure boxer's got the edge. He's got the advantage.
Now, we saw this play out very recently against Jamel Charlo and Tony Harrison. Jamel Charlo, boxer puncher, Tony Harrison, pure boxer. In that fight, you know, you saw Jamel Charlo looking for one big shot to end the fight. And that's the problem.
That's it.
You know, you're looking for that one opportunity, and it may never come. Because the guy across the ring, he's not giving you those kind of openings. He's a pure boxer. He's completely defensively minded. Hit and not get hit. He's going to deprive you of that opportunity to land that big knockout punch. And we all know that's what Jamel was looking for, but that opportunity never came. With a pure boxer, you know, looking for that one big shot,
Why not find it?
It's not a good idea. But a sustained attack, staying with the guy, swarming the guy, that's the way to go. It's for this reason that pressure fighters have a stylistic advantage over pure boxers, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to stay with you the whole fight. They're not going to leave you the fuck alone. They deprive that pure boxer of the opportunity to fight his fight. Now back to Julian Williams and his nuances, his characteristics, his particulars. Yes, he's a boxer puncher, but he's a boxer puncher that knows how to apply pressure. And against a pure boxer, that could be a key to success. Being that mid-range to inside guy when it's needed, when it's appropriate, to make the pure boxer uncomfortable. I.e., if he fights Lara the same way he fought Hurd, he might actually win this thing, in spite of being at a stylistic disadvantage. It all depends on what he decides to do.
Plays his cards right, he wins this thing.
Because regardless of which version of Lara you're talking about, the one that's here today or the one from years ago, this is a guy that has never liked any kind of pressure. And when it comes to pure boxers, pressure busts pipes. We saw what a bit of pressure did in the Angulo fight, the Molina fight, the Jarrett Hurd fight, and more recently, the Brian Castano fight. I think a lot of people forgot about that fight. I think a lot of people forgot about that performance. Brian Castano was laying it on thick. He was applying a lot of pressure. And you could see that Lara was uncomfortable in spots. It was a highly competitive fight. Pressure busts pipes when it comes to pure boxers. So the keys to success for Julian Williams really hinge on whether or not he decides to go in there and put forth a sustained attack, or if he so decides to box with the pure boxer. Because I'll tell you, having the luxury of options doesn't always mean you'll choose the right one. He's got to be careful how he goes about fighting this fight if and when it goes down. Now, when it comes to Lara,
We don't know if he's on the level.
it's really debatable whether or not he's still on the level these days. Having been in the ring wars that he's been in,
Over the
how
years.
he's been looking, you know, going out there and starching Canelo Alvarez's older brother in 2 rounds. That doesn't communicate both fucking diddly about where Lara really is at this point in the juncture. Yeah, everybody likes to see a guy get his head knocked off, but at some point you've got to address who that guy was. And we all know that Canelo's older brother is not one of the best and brightest fighters at the weight. And judging from how he performed, what preparation was made for the fight, doesn't look like any preparation was actually made at all. So all things considered, we don't know that Lara is the same kind of guy that he used to be. We don't know that he has what it takes to beat Julian Williams. He's got the right style for the job, but we don't know that he's still on the level. And if he's not on the level, Julian Williams might just beat him. Fascinating fight, very intriguing. And I don't think we're that far away from that fight. I think it's only a matter of time before the WBA order it. So I look forward to seeing that one. I think that's a fight that should be very entertaining. And finally, it was announced that Top Rank made a recent signing in the heavyweight division of one Agit Kabayel. Now, this is the same Agit Kabayel that beat Derek Chisora back in 2017 on the heels of Chisora's first fight with Dillian White. A very competitive fight, a very, physically taxing fight, a fight that some people thought could have went either way. A fight that, it seemed surprising that Derek Chisora could have participated in a fight like that and turned around and lost to this guy, this unheralded guy. Like, who the fuck's this? How do you lose to this guy? And all things considered, I think Kabayel's victory over Derek Chisora, given recent events, given that Derek Chisora is still floating around, still knocking guys out, I think Kabayel's victory over Chisora is a victory that aged well. And if Top Rank is signing this guy, it's Because it's a competitive market, and all these different outfits are buying up as much real estate in the form of talent as they can to prevent future friction and to keep the proverbial ball rolling. You understand? Top Rank is more involved in the heavyweight division now. They're more immersed in this heavyweight division than they have been in previous years. You know, most of what Top Rank had going on was shit at the lighter weights, whereas now they're very much immersed in the heavyweight division. They want to be a part of that scene, so they're keeping their pool of options open. They're expanding on their stable so that they can continue to have chess pieces on the board. Smart move on them that, you know what? Maybe you don't think this guy's world champion material. Maybe you think he is. But one way or another, you get your hands on that guy so that you can move him as a piece on the board. You know, Agit Kabayel, he was supposed to be fighting Joe Joyce very recently. He withdrew from the purse bid. You know, he's supposed to be defending his EBU title, and, you know, he bailed on that. And I don't think that's a fight that's completely off the table, you know, because Joe Joyce is on the Queensbury promotion side of the street with Frank Warren. And Frank Warren is in bed, more or less, with Top Rank. So even if the fight's not happening now, it's still a fight that could happen in the near future because the network connections, they are there. And at the end of the day, they signed the guy. So at some point, they're going to have to put him in there with somebody that has a pulse. You think about, you know, the heavyweight division and what it is today, how much money is being generated, what situations are being orchestrated out there by other outfits. Joshua versus Ruiz and what they got going on in Saudi Arabia. A fight that's going to generate a lot of money. And this would explain why all of a sudden Top Rank is very much involved, immersed in the heavyweight scene in a way that they haven't been in previous years. They got Fury, they got Pulev, they got Kabayel. I wouldn't be surprised if Oscar Rivas ends up going over there. The Dillian White fight is over. So he's going to have to get involved with some kind of an outfit. I dare say that I wouldn't be surprised if Jarrell Big Baby Miller, you know, he's got 13 days before he can be back in action, before that suspension of his will be lifted, whatever the fuck it is. 13, 14 days, whatever it is. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on the Top Rank side of the street. You know, he's a big shit talker. Americans like shit talkers. And Top Rank, they're in bed with the biggest sports network in the country. So Jarrell Miller, he'd actually fit right in over there on the Top Rank side of the street. That's a guy who could really make a splash over there. You know, whatever he had going on with Matchroom, that's dead. And, you know, I can't quite see him going to the PBC side of things because we all know who their priority is. So, you know, don't be surprised if Jarrell Miller ends up where Agit Kabayel has ended up. Top Rank seems to be building what could be a very formidable stable of fighters in the heavyweight division.